If asked, I reckon most people would say that Monster Hunter World and Iceborne have a pretty boring story. They might say the cutscenes tend to drag on for too long and none of the characters are particularly interesting. I mean, they weren't even given names beyond their job titles, so you can rank them as less developed than Dora the Explorer or Bob the Builder. For the most part, I agree, but I also think that getting into this mindset that all the story content is trash makes people not bother engaging with it at all. It's like if you've already convinced yourself there's no diamonds hidden in a big pile of shit, you're hardly going to dig through it anyway just to be sure. In this video, I wanted to talk about the extra depth you can find if you go in with a slightly more open mind, because I think there is a thematic idea here that gets explored with quite some nuance. To be clear, I'm not going to argue that the story is secretly a great, misunderstood masterpiece. I think it really does stand mostly in the bad, with maybe an arm and a few toes stretching over into mediocre. I'm also going to ignore almost all of the dialogue and character drama, and focus in on the way the plot's underlying themes are explored through both the visual and gameplay design of the two final bosses. These two manage to communicate the ideas that underpin the story far better than any of the written material, and highlights how this series manages to design encounters that feel really special. As a brief recap, your hunter is a member of the Research Commission, which has set sail to the uninhabited New World to look into an abnormal migration of elder dragons. They used to migrate from the populated Old World to this new one once a century, but for some mysterious reason, it's now happening every decade. From that, we can already spot the core idea the story is going to explore. How do humans interact with the natural world? It's also one that seemingly gets an answer immediately. They should check in on it and help keep things in order. All the hunting you do is to either help the investigation progress or to directly save the ecosystem. For example, at one point, Nogigante chases other elder dragons out of their natural habitats and into neighbouring ones. These things are so powerful that they could completely wreck their new stomping grounds, so for the good of the natural world you have to go out and hunt them, and then Nogigante itself for good measure. It's a very basic idea and one that's become so integral to Monster Hunter at this point that its inclusion in World isn't the least bit surprising. Instead, the interesting part is the depth that idea gets thanks to a single line of dialogue and the final boss Xeno'jiiva. The line in question is, "May the sapphire star guide your way." It's one of the first things you hear in the opening cutscene, and then it's repeated throughout the game by various characters. Hidden away in an easy-to-miss book, it's explained that the phrase comes from a creation myth. The short version is that in the beginning there was nothing, until 4 dragons created everything that makes up the natural world. A 5th dragon flew up into the sky and became a sapphire blue star, which guided humans to this newly created world, and life as we know it began. So within the game, saying to someone, "May the sapphire star guide your way," is a bit like wishing them well, and expressing that you hope the divine and mystical elements of the universe will guide them along the right path through their struggles. Meetings are often concluded with the phrase too, so that kind of hoping for help from a higher power gets applied to the work of the investigation too. And to be fair, they need all the help they can get, because the threats keep escalating. For a while, the crew tracks the big turtle dragon Zora Magdaros, which helps them realise that the dragon migration is a natural process by which monsters travel to the Rotten Vale to die. As their bodies decay, they release their energy and nutrients into the surroundings, which is then transported across the continent by underground channels to fuel new growth in a nice little circle of life. The problem is the dragons are veering off course and heading someplace else instead, unbalancing the process and throwing the whole continent into danger. It turns out their new end destination isn't a place, but a monster, Xeno'jiiva. We arrive just in time to see it being born from a gigantic cocoon suspended in the heart of the continent's underground channels. Its semi-transparent blue skin and bulging sensory organs make it one of the weirdest looking monsters in the game, an impression that feels even stronger thanks to how the rest of the roster was designed. Almost everything coming before it had some kind of realism implemented to make them feel more like believable animals. Like, instead of Anjanath just being able to breathe fire through some kind of magic, it instead creates a kind of flammable mucus and then ignites that. It's still a creature that can only exist in a fantasy, but having a rough biological way to explain it makes it feel more plausible and tangible as it stands before you in-game. Xeno'jiiva completely abandons this design principle. Beyond pure visuals, it doesn't even fight using some kind of earthly element like fire or water, but with laser beams of pure energy. It's been designed to feel alien, and the way it clashes with everything else in the game marks it as something that stands outside the natural ecosystem, an idea that's reinforced by its role in the written plot. Xeno lures the dragons away from the rotten veil so it can suck up all the energy released by their deaths for itself. It's a parasite, siphoning energy out of the ecosystem and preventing the cycle of life from renewing itself. Complete ecological collapse is inevitable unless Xeno is stopped, but there's a small problem. This creep is the sapphire star everyone's been praying to throughout the journey. The mythical dragon and Xeno are both blue, they both guide others to a new world, and they're both linked with the celestial. If you think I'm talking out of my arse, I'd recommend you hang around Xeno's for a bit until you cut off its tail. You can spot the symbol of the sapphire star running through the stump. Xeno represents a corrupted version of the idyllic myth, the supposedly caring guidance replaced with a dangerous lure. In terms of the story, I think this connection is made to force the characters into realizing that they can't rely on greater guidance, and that's where the thematic nuance comes in. It's still a relatively simple idea that humans should do what's necessary to protect the environment, but now with a small but significant addendum. We need to play an active role in doing that. Sitting back and hoping that things work out for the best, ideally with the help of some divine intervention, just isn't going to cut it. After Xeno's defeat, the crew members start calling your character their Sapphire Star, marking a shift in mentality. The mantle of responsibility has been transferred from the divine to the mortal. The game ends in a piss-up where everyone celebrates their success, and they seem hopeful about the future. The experience of this journey has helped them understand how to approach similar problems going forward, and they're confident in their newly developed personal sense of guidance. Surely now, humans have got this whole protecting nature thing down, right? Shara Ishvalda is designed to prove that completely wrong. Iceborne's plot has almost the exact same beats as Worlds. Another strange migration lures the crew to new frontiers. This time the mid-story threat is blue instead of grey, and there's another world-threatening monster occupying the final boss slot, a mythic being known as the Old Everworm. Again, we can skip past almost everything and go straight to the end, since that's where the thematic stuff really comes in. By this point, the crew have realised that the Old Everworm is causing seismic disruption throughout the continent, and managed to figure out where it's going to show up next. Guided by their past experience with Xeno, they know they've got a responsibility to go and stop the monster and save the continent. When they arrive at the barren island, it's empty, but then... We learnt in the base story that Nogigante is a force for natural imbalance, and so, worried that it might interfere with the mission to stop the Everworm, you're told to permanently ground the flying hedgehog as quickly as possible. You manage just in time, and seconds later the real threat shows up. The ground collapses and crumbles away, but our hunter walks towards it without any worries. And really, why shouldn't they? Past events have proved that their role in the ecosystem is to be a protective guardian, a job they've excelled at up to this point. They've earned an internal sense of guidance that acts as a well from which they can draw confidence. They know this is the right thing to do. But as soon as the fight starts, a poisonous drop of doubt falls into that well. You're pitted against what appears to be an amalgamation of living rocks. With hindsight, we know what's lurking underneath this shell, but for now, try and forget that and remember that during the first time, that's not immediately clear. These big rocks completely cover the body and hide all the organic parts, so it's like the earth is being animated by some magical force, a bit like a golem. Again, this is an idea that breaks the trend of realistic design just as Xeno did, but this time that break comes from introducing a mystical element. After a bit of battery, rocks start falling away and you realise that you are actually fighting some kind of living creature after all. It's just got a rocky suit of armour on. The mysticism is dispersed and that weakening confidence is renewed. More and more pieces fall away as you keep up the offensive, until eventually it's too much and the whole facade starts to crumble entirely. Dust and sand obscure everything for a second before the true monster reveals itself. Shara Ishvalda is here, and what a freak it is. Just like Xeno, this design is screaming for you to notice how unnatural it is, but like its first stage foreshadowed, in a different way. Shara's bright and colourful, with fleshy, tendril-like wings and human-looking teeth, and it's covered in all these contorting muscles that run and connect across its body in strange ways. Its face is reminiscent of a demon from Eastern mythology, giving it an explicitly divine air. But the strangest thing is in how its eyes behave. When they finally open, they don't track your character as they run around in the game. Shara looks into the camera and stares directly at you, the person sitting on the other side of the screen. Try and shake the camera however you like and its gaze remains locked onto you, making it the only monster in the series to break the fourth wall and seemingly comprehend that it's playing a role for an observing audience. This design and behaviour leads to only one conclusion. This thing is strange, you don't understand it, and it might be impossible to ever understand it. Xeno's strangeness came from its fantastic biology, but that's still a concept we recognise we might eventually be able to understand. It's like it evolved on another planet, but if we understand how evolution works, then maybe we could get Xeno figured out. It's hard to imagine any kind of biological explanation for how Shara can look outside of the video game it's in. And that is the key difference in how these two achieve similar but different goals. Both aim to unsettle, but Shara's design wants to leave you absolutely bewildered too. After it's brought down, the crew gather at the corpse, but before the pints start flowing, Shara springs back to life in an ambush. In this moment of danger, it's none other than Nogigante that saves the day, a twist I think some might have found unsatisfying. Nobody enjoys seeing something happen during a cutscene that could have been achieved through gameplay, and seeing this world-ending issue essentially solve itself undermines your achievement a bit. It's like you beat the boss, but you didn't really, and since Nogigante was there when you arrived, it probably would have killed Shara regardless of your involvement. But it's the punchline to the idea Iceborne's trying to explore, that you don't know nearly as much as you think you do. Back in the original story, Nogigante chased other elder dragons across the continent, leading to an imbalance that could only be solved by hunting it and its targets. That solution fails to consider that humans have been stomping around on the continent for about a week, while Nogigante has presumably been here for decades, meaning this imbalance is probably a pretty frequent thing, and since the world hasn't ended yet, it'll probably right itself without extra interference. But the game needed examples of hunting for the greater ecological good to develop its theme, so it had to ignore that idea. This kind of simplification means that when Nogigante shows up at the same place as the old Everworm, the learned conclusion is that this must be a bad thing and that interference, in this case to kill Nogigante, is the right thing to do. It's only when it returns to finish Shara that we understand that this way of thinking is wrong. Far from a force for imbalance, Nogigante has an important role in ensuring the opposite. It hunts the strongest members of the ecosystem, other elder dragons, and in so doing makes sure that they don't cause widespread chaos thanks to their immense power. Assuming that human interference was necessary to save the world from Shara, i.e. Nogigante had to be killed so that humans could do the real work, was what nearly led to that exact disaster happening. You can argue the cutscene's a bit unclear on if the crew are in actual danger or not. I mean, the one who just kicked the shit out of Shara is standing right there with them, but had we truly killed Nogigante instead of just wounding it, Shara could have wiped out its only obstacles in one quick ambush and been free to go sink the continent. All this comes together to recast that confident walk at the beginning as one of pure hubris. They're arrogantly walking towards something they'll never be able to understand, and have been on a path that might have enabled the very thing they're trying to stop. In this way, Shara's design and the sequence of events completely contradict the lessons learned and the themes explored in the base story. It taught that being active and intentional about keeping nature balanced was a good thing, and now Iceborne says that by doing that, you might end up causing even more harm than if you'd have just stayed home. The celebrations afterwards are much more somber than those that came before. It's like everyone's humbled to realise their work doesn't place them in the role of some supreme arbiter over nature. They're just one link, not the most important or the least, because the food chain is so complex that awarding worth like that is impossible. They realise that helping maintain natural balance isn't always easy, but decide to keep trying. It's still what should be done, it's just going to take more care and humility to make sure it's done right. Exploring an idea like this obviously isn't the main concern of the game, and its basic structure limits how much depth or nuance it can really give. I mean, the solution to every problem does always need to be hunting after all. It would have been easy to just create another plot driven by the idea that humans need to protect the environment, with the hunting gameplay as a means of doing that. World took the more interesting approach by putting emphasis on the importance of individual action, and Iceborne took it a step further by exploring how dangerous it can be to rush into that action assuming you know what's best. The final message seems to be that it isn't always clear what we as people need to do to protect the natural world, but that uncertainty isn't an excuse to not make any efforts towards it. An impressive feat for a game all about killing animals for fashion and fun, and one that speaks to some of the reasons these games are so special. You might not play Monster Hunter for the story, but if you give it a chance, you might find that being a bit more open to what it's trying to say makes for a far more interesting experience.